Go to economics chapter 35, causes of economic growth and output gap. But today we're going to, the focus now is going to be on positive actual growth and potential growth. So we're going to start with positive actual growth. So when you talk about growth, growth simply means the output within the economy is increasing. It simply talks about the real GDP. And when we talk about real GDP, it means we have adjusted the output with inflation. So that is what the real GDP is. Are you with me? So we start. It said that positive actual growth implies that both aggregate demand and short-run aggregate supply increases. So we call it positive actual growth because the aggregate demand within the economy, which has combined consumption, investment, export minus import, and government spending together. So if this increases, if any of those components increases, that means the output within the economy has increased or aggregate demand within the economy has increased. So we start growth. Growth is measured by the percentage change in the real GDP. So we measure growth based on the percentage change in our real GDP. And we know what real GDP is now, not just GDP. That is a nominal GDP. We're talking about the GDP that has been adjusted for inflation. Good. So then we have the real GDP, which is the GDP that has been adjusted for inflation. Now let's go to actual growth. Why do we call it actual growth? We call it actual growth because it means that the real output within that economy has increased. The real output, that means our GDP has increased. So this implies that aggregate demand within the economy has increased. Now, when we talk about aggregate demand, like I said earlier, it is consumption plus investment plus government spending plus export minus import. So if the four components increased, then it means aggregate demand within the economy has increased. And as a result of that, the economy has improved in its actual growth.
I have a question.
Yes.
Why do you subtract
Import.
import?
Import is we did multiply, right? Import is a withdrawal within the economy.
Okay.
Import is withdrawals. So it means money is not coming into the economy, money is flowing out of the economy. It's just like saving. So savings, import, they are withdrawals within the economy. And if it's withdrawal, it doesn't add up to the growth of the economy.
Okay.
Is it clear?
Yes.
Great. So aggregate demand, like I told you, the components we have C plus I plus G plus X minus N. That gives us what aggregate demand is. So a positive actual growth now. Let's go to a positive actual growth. Why do we call it positive actual growth? We call it positive actual growth because the aggregate demand within the economy has shifted to the right, or the short-term aggregate supply has shifted to the right. So we're going to start with the aggregate demand. So when we talk about aggregate demand, we're talking about the total demand within the economy, right? Great. So an increase in aggregate demand. So what are the reasons why we could have a rightward shift in the aggregate demand curve? We could have a rightward shift in the aggregate demand curve because consumption within the economy has increased. Investment within the economy has increased. Government spending within the economy has increased. And net exports has increased, which means export minus import has increased. So we have more exports than imports. So if all these things increased, it means the aggregate demand curve within the economy has increased. And that will shift the aggregate demand curve rightward from AD1 to AD2
D2.
because the real output within the economy would increase from Y1 to Y2. But at the same time, the price level will increase from P1 to P2. This can be graphically represented as this. Okay. I think these ones are clear, right?
Yes.
Good. So you can have this. So the other one is the short-run aggregate supply. For the short-run aggregate supply, we're simply talking about the supply side of the economy. So what are the reasons why we could have an increase in the short-run aggregate supply curve? Yeah, I wrote. An increase in the short-run aggregate supply curve may occur as a result of a rise in productivity. And when we talk about productivity, we're talking about output in relation to input. So either labor or capital. So because that's why we have labor productivity and capital productivity. Great. So an increase in productivity, a rise in productivity would mean that the cost of production would fall. So that would increase the short-term aggregate supply within the economy. And that is also is a positive actual growth. Another one is about a fall in the price of commodity. When we talk about commodity, we're talking about resources that we use in producing other resources. So if there's a fall in price of global commodity, so which simply means importation of raw materials and components will be cheaper. And as a result of that, our cost of production is expected to fall.
So commodities are like capital goods.
Yes, you can. No, not really capital goods. They are goods. They are resources, like raw materials. We wouldn't call them capital goods because when we call them capital goods are simply linked to technology, to equipment. But we're talking about components and raw materials here, things that we use in producing goods. Well, you can, but literally we're talking about commodity, which is not technology. We're talking about raw materials, those raw materials, resources that we use in producing order that we have to convert into finished goods. So if resources that we have to convert into finished goods, their price, the world price for them are cheaper. It means firms that use them will have their cost of production falling. As a result of that, the short-term aggregate supply curve will shift rightwards. Does it make sense to you now?
Yes.
Great. So we have increase in consumption, increase in investment, increase in net export, increase in government spending, bringing about an increase in the actual growth, which means the aggregate demand within the economy is increasing. The aggregate demand curve will shift rightward from AD1 to AD2 as the real output will increase from Y1 to Y2. Then the other side is from the supply side, which is the firms. So an increase in productivity. A rise in productivity means that the cost of production would fall. As a result of that, they will be able to increase their supply, shifting the short-term aggregate supply curve rightward. Another point is about a fall in the price of world commodity. So that means they will be able to get raw materials at a cheaper rate. Getting it at a cheaper rate means the cost of production is expected to fall. So that would also encourage them to produce more. So the short-term aggregate supply curve will shift rightward from SRAS1 to SRAS2, and the price level is expected to drop from P1 to P2 as the real output is increasing from Y1 to Y2. So a rightward shift in the short-term aggregate supply curve will reduce the price level. But a rightward shift in the aggregate demand curve will increase the price level. I think both of them are clear.
Yes.
So these are a rightward shift in the short-term aggregate supply curve. Any question about that? Good. So we go on to, so this takes us to other points that I have to mention here. So here I wrote, an increase in the short, okay, yeah, I said notes. Countries that rely heavily on export-led growth. When we talk about export-led growth, ELGH, it says that export expansion is one of the determinants of economic growth. I mean, export expansion is one of the determinants for growth within the economy. So those countries that rely heavily on exports, so when there is downturn, when there's global downturn, it affects them because their reliance is on export. Now there's no export. There won't be export because those countries that wants to do export are witnessing recession.
Mhm.
Do you get the point I'm making here?
Yes.
There's recession. If there's recession within the economy,
Can't spend.
they can't spend. And if they cannot spend, it simply means they won't be able to buy other countries' goods. Does it make sense?
Yes.
So here I said, export-led growth hypothesis, ELGH, says that export expansion is one of the determinants of growth. So if Nigeria as a country relies heavily on exportation. So if there's global recession, it means national output within the economy in different countries would fall. And if national output is falling because there's downturn, they won't be able to do imports. They won't be able to do imports because they will not be able to buy from Nigeria based on the fact that they don't have income to use in buying. So do you get the point here? So countries that rely heavily on exportation become vulnerable when there's global downturn. So that is the point you need to understand. But we have to also understand that export is a component of aggregate demand. So if the actual growth of an economy has to increase, net export has to increase. So most of the countries have their actual growth increasing based on the fact that their export is increasing.
Mhm.
But the point is, if the reliance is on export and there's global downturn, there's global recession, it affects them. So it drops their aggregate demand. I think the point is clear about export-led growth. Export-led growth simply means that expansion through growth, export expansion will bring about increasing growth. But we must not rely heavily on exportation because if we do, factors that are beyond our control might put us into vulnerability. I think the point is clear there.
Yes.
Great. So, okay. Then we move on to potential growth. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we talk about potential growth, we're talking about this implies to the increase in the productive capacity of an economy. That means the productive capacity. Now we are thinking about maximizing our capacity. It's not the same as actual growth. For actual growth, we are still not reaching our full potential. But for potential growth, that's why for actual growth, we talked about short-term aggregate supply and aggregate demand. But for potential growth, we will talk about the PPF and the long-run aggregate supply. So for potential growth, this implies to the increase in the productive capacity of an economy. This is directly linked with the productive possibility frontier or the production possibility curve and how much it is increasing over time. So we are simply talking about an increase in the PPF, a natural shift in the PPF over time. That is what potential growth is about. So an increase in the potential growth, here I wrote. So an increase in the potential growth implies that the PPF is shifting rightward or outward. That is, the maximum potential output of the economy is increasing. So we have a graph here, figure 3. So we have figure 3. Are you there?
Yes.
So looking at figure 3, we have the quantity of investment and the quantity of consumption goods. So what are the factors that determine potential growth? Here I wrote, it is determined by factors such as labor and capital. So when we talk about labor, we're talking about human effort, physically or mentally, that increases the production, that helps in the production of goods and services. So if the supply of labor is increasing within the economy, it is expected that it will increase the productive potential of such economy because output is expected to increase. And also investment in capital goods. When we have investment in capital goods, it means output within the economy is also going to increase. So those two things will bring about a potential growth. So it will shift the the PPF outward from PPF1 to PPF2. So look at the graph here. So we have, look, based on this graph, we have a movement from A to B, movement from B to C, movement from C to D. So when we talk about a potential growth here, it means there's a movement from C to D, because the economy is moving from its actual growth to its potential growth. It's at this point it can that means it's reaching its maximum productivity. So now let's go back to point A, B, and C. Point C is between the boundary. This represents actual growth. The movement from C to D represents potential growth. Movement from A to B, or from A to B, or A to C, or B to C, or A to B are still within the growth level, the actual growth of the economy. So movement here doesn't mean that the economy has reached its full potential, because the potential here is at PPF1. The economy can reach PPF2. But if the economy is still operating within PPF1, it means actual growth. Do you understand what actual growth is here?
Yes.
So a movement from A to the movement in between the boundary A to C is actual growth. Moving outside the boundary of PPF1 brings about potential growth. I think the point is clear.
Yes.
So here I wrote, okay, it can also be shown through the long-run aggregate supply curve. So we have a product, which simply means either we have more factors of production or we have efficiency in the methods we use in production. So the two factors that will bring about an increase in the PPF or an outward shift in the PPF are: one, increase in factors of production, maybe discovery of new raw materials, discovery of natural resources, or labor is increasing, or we find a way of producing or using a method that brings about efficiency. Because as soon as there's efficiency, it brings about reduced cost. Then the productive potential is expected to rise. So based on the PPF above, the productive potential of an economy has increased due to the movement from C to D. So there's a movement from C to D, which brings about increasing productive potential of the economy. So note, a movement from A to B, B to C, or A to C only illustrates positive actual growth, like I said earlier. So this means that the real GDP has increased. And when we talk about real GDP, it simply means GDP that has been adjusted for inflation. So for A to C, it's all about increasing real GDP. But when we talk about potential growth, it simply means there's movement from C
To
to
D.
D. And the movement from C to D will be as a result of increasing the factors of production or efficiency in the methods of production. I think it's clear.
Yes.
Okay, so however, the causes of actual growth are also causes of potential growth. For example, an increase in investment means aggregate demand is increasing. So an increase in investment, how is it linked with aggregate demand? It is linked with aggregate demand because investment is a component of
Aggregate
aggregate demand.
demand.
So if investment is increasing, it simply means aggregate demand is increasing. So this will cause actual growth and can also cause potential growth. So how will an increase in investment bring about increase in potential growth? We have to understand that the factors that bring about increase in actual growth can also bring about an increase in potential growth. So which simply means that when we talk about actual growth or potential growth, we are simply talking about growth within the economy. So what we only have to understand is in what context are we talking about it? Are we talking about it in the short run or in the long run? So if we are talking about it in the short run, it simply means we are talking about the actual growth. And if we are talking about it in the long run, it simply means we're talking about potential growth. So that's why I wrote here that if the stock of capital goods increases, we're not talking about components or raw materials. Components and raw materials are linked to short-run aggregate supply. But when we talk about technology increasing, technology is in the long run. So that means we're talking about the context in the long run aggregate supply. Do you understand the point here?
Yes.
So whatever the case might be, there's always economic growth, either through actual growth or potential growth. So any question about actual growth and potential growth?
No.
So we simply understand that when we talk about actual growth, we're talking about in the short run, which is about aggregate demand and short run aggregate supply. And when we talk about potential growth, it's in the long run, and the movement is from C to D, which means factors of production are increasing or there's efficiency in the method of production. So in the next class, we're going to start talking about the trend growth rate.